What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to show you about 9 different sustains that I've made, and we're going to go through some of the different techniques on how I've made them. 8 of them are in Serum, and 1 of them is in Massive. So we're going to look at some of the different plugins that I use post-processing and just go through the different methods of making some Tearout sustains today. With that, let's get started. All right, so now we're gonna check each of these out individually, but before we do that, we're just gonna take a quick listen to each of these little MIDI clips so you get a sample of what's to come. So there you have it. Now let's just start diving into these bad boys. So these first 2 actually are the same preset, but I just wanted to show you the power of frequency shifter. So I'll get into the preset here in a second, but this one doesn't have the frequency shifter on it. This one does have the frequency shifter on it, and it's on the ring mode. So here's the first one, and here's the second one just with that. Completely changes the tonality of it. Something else that is kind of cool to note, and I'll probably go into this more in another video, but if you take a frequency shifter and put the dry wet down less than 100% and start moving the frequencies around, you'll get this weird warbly sound. So that's something that's kind of cool. You can make some really cool effects with that, put it on vocals. I'm pretty sure Murata does that with some of his vocals. But for this first one, it's just a preset from Odd Profit's pack. I'm not exactly sure which pack, but if you go to his website, you should be able to find it pretty easily. The name of this one is BA Throttle. I don't think I did a whole lot to it. So yeah, pretty much, let's just see what it sounds like before and after. Okay, so I cut out the lows and some of the mids. Let's turn off frequency shifter. So yeah, there's no shame in using somebody else's preset. I think this is a great demonstration of beefing it up a little bit outside of Serum. Using a little bit of OTT, you can see we've just added 10 decibels of gain, and it's only at 49% wet. Soft saturation, soft sine saturation is my favorite. I think it gets a really good full sound and doesn't overdo it. The reason why you see this little boost right here is I was kind of tuning the sustain to A sharp. So the note is in D sharp, but if you know anything about music theory, A sharp is the 5th of D sharp. So I just grabbed, if you look down here when I hover over this, it says A sharp, so I grabbed that and I boosted that so it's a little bit more present. The next thing is just to finish it off, a Camel Crusher. Nowadays, Camel Crusher's GUI doesn't really work with the newer versions of some DAWs. So like if I open it, you know, there's nothing showing up here, but you can still click and do things, you just can't see what you're doing. So you can click on these different presets, and I was lucky enough to get the chance to map everything out before the GUI stopped working when I updated to a newer operating system. So yeah, I think if you haven't, or if you can get Camel Crusher, definitely get it. You've probably heard about it already, but British Clean is one of the best presets out there. There is a limiter built into this, so there's no need to put a G clip or anything else like that after. So this is the same one, and again, all we did was just put on the OG frequency shifter on the ring mod setting. So pretty self-explanatory there. All right, so now let's go ahead and listen to this one. So this is a preset that I made just using some basic shapes. Oscillator A is just a triangle wavetable or wave shape, and then oscillator B is actually the sawtooth wave shape. It looks kind of funky right now, but that's because you turn on the sync window for this effects knob. So put that on sync window, and then that goes up to about 78. And by the way, you have to take LFO1 and assign it to this sync window. You'll also take LFO1 and assign it to the mix knob for the filter. But you're going to assign that to both of those knobs, and the amount for the sync window is 78, and it's 100% for the mix knob on the filter. So let's keep going through these. Pretty much everything except for the random knob is the same on the top for oscillator A. We're going to put the FM from B amount at 48%, and then the volume at 91%. Realistically, you could have put it to 100. Maybe I just was messing around there. The oscillator B, you're going to pull the random knob down to 61, and you're going to leave everything else stock except for the detune. You'll pull it down to 0.05 and add the unison up to 7. We're also going to boost the octave on oscillator B by 1 octave and turn the fine up by 13. So now that we've got that, we're going to add some noise to this. So just go into analog, click ARP circuit, and then add just a little bit of volume to that so it gives it some noise. So without it, it's very subtle, but I think it adds an extra little bit of grit that just sounds really nice. So then we're going to turn on our filter, and since there's no volume coming out of B, we only need to make sure that this filter is applied to oscillator A. So the cutoff is at 30 Hertz, the res is at 64, the drive is at 15, and the damp is at 16. So that's pretty much it for the oscillators tab. You guys can just kind of copy the stuff that I do on this and use it however you want. I don't use the hyper on hyper dimension, just a little bit of dimension to give it some width. So dimension's at 9, the mix is at 41. On this I do linear fold distortion. Should be careful with this because it can get really noisy and messy really easily. So that's kind of why I have the wet down to a little bit above half at 53%. The distortion drive is at 57%. And then with this compressor, we have multiband enabled. I'm pretty sure all of these are stock, but the gain I boosted by 9 decibels, and I pulled the threshold down to 13.3. I like to pull the threshold down because it really squashes the hell out of the sound and makes it sound really good. This combs is here. I don't know why, because it is off, but you can get some other cool tones out of your sustain by adding a combs to it. It adds a bunch of little peaks and valleys. If you haven't seen a combs filter, it's pretty wild, the amount of peaks and valleys that are really sharp. So it adds different tones to it. Anyway, we'll turn that off for right now. Now we're going to put on the dynamic tube, which is a saturator that you can find in your audio effects. If you just type in dynamic tube, you can grab it, pull it in here, and then so the tone I had up at 0.8, had bias at 33%, and we'll drive it by 7. That's pretty much it. That's really all you need to do, other than add the envelope at 110, and you're good to go. We're going to turn this one off, but I was just trying to show you. You can find the dynamic tube just by looking it up in the search bar. So we have a disperser on F sharp. I'm not sure why it's on F sharp. Actually, I would pull it up to A sharp because, again, we're trying to keep it around the 5th of the root note. So then I put on erosion. This just adds a little bit more grit and scruff, I guess, to it. So the mount's at 15, and the frequency is at 5,040 kilohertz. Sorry, hertz. We added an OTT, amount all the way up, time all the way up, saturation on medium curve because I wanted it to be a little bit more distorted, and added 6 decibels of drive. With this EQ, I just wanted to boost. There's this tone right around here. So I felt like this sounded good in this area, so I decided to boost it to make it sound a little bit more clear. I did another OTT, and then another saturator on soft sine with the drive up by 16. So if I took this saturator off, you'd realize that these OTTs are really squashing the hell out of it. Now if I turn this saturator on. So the saturator is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. And then with this, you can cut the lows out, but I wanted to show you, you can automate the frequency and give it kind of an introductory effect when you start it out. So yeah. All right. So now that we've talked about that, let's check out this next one. Okay, so before all the post-processing, not bad. I tend to separate my sustains from the sub. That way we can process each of them differently, layer them on top of each other, and really make sure that they're all loud and meshing well together. So this is actually another preset from an Odd Profit pack called Every Frequency. If you want this, I would just recommend going to his website. Sometimes he does discounts and free stuff. But yeah, this one's just called Every Frequency. And it's in his Guns pack. So give that a shot. Just let you guys look at this for a little bit. And then we'll let you look at the effects here for a little bit in case you don't want to buy the pack, but I recommend getting it. So anyway, another method that you guys have probably seen in my other videos is using Corpus. I have this one preset that I made. I don't know why, but I named it Skull Smash. This is a something new that I just found out. You can open up this little menu on the side of Corpus, and you can basically tell it to resonate at the frequency that's being input instead of choosing a specific note with this knob. So if I go like this and leave this off, so it also adds a lot of decay and ringing afterwards. So if I turn this off decay and bring it all the way up, when I stop it, you can hear there's no more ringing. So if I turn the frequency on, this will just let the note that's going through play out and resonate at that root, versus if I were to turn it off, I could tune it if I wanted to. So you guys can kind of see the parameters that I have here. You can just copy those if you want to and use that on your post-processing chains. You've probably seen this also. There's a preset that I made called Strangle. It's an OTT without the upwards compression. So I just have 2 of those, amount fully wet and time all the way up at 1,000. And I have another Skull Smash. So these are presets that I like the sound of, and I think I didn't really change much. The spread is at 0 instead of 21. The decay is at 420. Nice. And the material is at 29. So those are really the only differences, not a huge amount of difference. But start making some presets of your own with the Ableton plugins, and just reach for those every time, because it makes the process way easier. And look at that, another Strangle OTT. So I was just really compressing and distorting the hell out of this, just compressing it really. And then we've got an EQ8, just cutting out all the lows, because without it, it sounds good, but the low end is kind of moving back and forth, which we don't really want. So again, I would add a separate sub layer. Then I just put a saturator on soft sine to really fill out the spectrum by saturating it a little bit more and driving it by 5 decibels. So that's that one. Now let's look at the next one. Awesome. So with this, I believe it's actually a preset from an Ivory pack, but you could make this from scratch. This squelchy wavetable is, in the spectral wavetable folder. And then this is just a basic shapes triangle wave, or maybe even a sawtooth wave with the sync all the way up. Another pack that I definitely recommend you getting, the Ivory pack. There's a bunch of good stuff in there, and it's been out for a while, but it's just so good. So many people are still using it. But yeah, this is distorted screech, and basically I'm not going to go into this one specifically because I recommend you going and buying the pack. But I'll show you the post-processing and what it sounds like before and after. So let's just group these. So out of the box is pretty weak. Sounds a lot better with the post-processing. So we add an overdrive on it. This is just to give the high end a little bit more gain. You can see the hertz are at 3,340 something. This other frequency amount is at 5.28. I left the drive and the tone alone, and then the rest of this stuff down here has also been left alone. So we added another Corpus, but instead of it being on the plate, we put it on pipe. So we gave it a little bit of a different resonance than normal. We still use the off decay at 100% and the spread at 100%, and then the tune at D sharp. So dry wet is also at 50. And the decay is at 533 milliseconds, and the radius is at 93%. So let's see what it sounds like without it. It adds a little bit more tone and a little bit more side signal. This is another plugin that I absolutely love. It's called Side Widener. I've been using JST plugins for a while now. I used to have the Side Widener, the original version. If you're not familiar with JST, you guys should go check out their website. They usually make plugins for metal music and rock and genres like that, but they are some very well-made plugins that I stand by. This is also adding a little bit more side signal, so without it, it's pretty subtle, but I think it makes a difference. All right, so now we have two vocoders. The first one is in the modulator setting, just at 24% dry wet with the formant all the way up. This is also very subtle. Yeah, extremely subtle. This vocoder is adding that noise, that little hiss layer. So you could add more of each of these with the dry wet if you want to. I felt that it didn't need that much, just a subtle amount of each. But yeah, formant all the way up. I prefer the left-right option instead of stereo. I don't know why, I just think it sounds a little bit cooler in my opinion. Then we have two strangles at 100% wet, and then a soft sine saturator at 2 decibels. This one was really wide, especially because of these vocoders. They were adding a whole lot of side signal to it. So I needed to go into the EQ and really just pull back on some of the side frequencies, because they were pushing through way more than I wanted. So yeah, that is pretty much that. Let's take a listen to the next one. All right, so this is, I think, what a lot of people call the cell phone bass. I'll show you how to make it, but one thing that I would recommend too is grabbing this little pitch mod or pitch wheel down here, and sometimes moving the pitch or automating the pitch while it's playing. Can give it a really cool effect, but let's get into it. So this was a preset that I made. It's just 2 triangle waveforms. This first oscillator is FMing from B. The oscillator B is FMing from the sub, and the randoms are pulled down all the way. This LFO is actually supposed to be modulating the filter. So we just have a double peak filter that is covering both or all oscillator A, B, the noise oscillator, and the sub oscillator. So let's take a listen to it without the sub oscillator. The sub oscillator really carries this. So having 3 oscillators is what's giving it that ringing sound. I'll show you how to do another cell phone bass right after this, but what we're going to do is listen to some of these other oscillator wave types with this bass. So most of them are not that great, but you could do some really crazy stuff with resampling some of these. So realistically, all I did was in oscillator B, I boosted the octave up 3, and then I FM'd from B at 53%. This is down 1 octave, and the FM from the sub is at 50%. You don't necessarily need this filter on. It just adds a little bit more resonance to it, more sharpness on certain frequencies. So if that's what you want, go for it, but it's not necessary. We do have a little bit of distortion going on, just tube distortion at 83% with the mix all the way up. There is a chorus. Make sure you pull the low pass filter all the way up. The mix is at 50%. Depth is all the way down. Delay 2 is all the way down. Delay 1 is at 0.6 milliseconds, and the rate is at 0.08 hertz. The compressor is on a multi-band setting. I didn't really do a whole lot to this one. Yeah, that's pretty stock. Again, I had another Combs on here, but it's off, so let's see what it sounds like with it on. So again, you know, Combs can boost and cut certain frequencies. Right there, it's in an area where it's cutting out the most prominent frequencies, so that's probably why I turned it off. And then after that, we just added disperser at, oh, that's pretty low. So one is lower and one is higher, and they're both at E. So since this note, the root note is at D sharp, I'd probably do something like A sharp here, and then maybe A sharp up here, or go to D sharp. I think that sounds way better. And then we added an amp on the blues setting, just a very subtle amount, just 13% in mono. And then we added an overdrive to boost some of the mid to high frequencies, mostly the mids. So the bottom is pretty stock, and then the hertz is at 1110 hertz, and the amount is at 2.09. I don't know why this utility is here. It is doing absolutely nothing. So I have Pro Q3, and it is at it's at D sharp, 1250 hertz. So it's just cutting out all of the low and mid frequencies. And then again, we have a Camel Crusher on the British Clean setting. Can't go wrong with British Clean. So without Camel Crusher, it just beefs it up so much. All right, now let's take a look at this second cell phone bass. I wanted to show you guys you can make a cell phone bass without using a bunch of FM. You realistically can just use a shifter, which is the new version of the old school frequency shifter. What you would want to do is either go into pitch or frequency, and then select the rectangle LFO, and then start pitching the frequencies around to where you think sounds good. And then you can also mess with the amount. That'll give it some different tones too. So let's just see what it sounds like. That's on the pitch, so. And I'm just moving the amount knob for the rectangular LFO rate. So you get crazy tones just using the amount knob and not even messing with the coarse pitch. Let's check out when we use frequency. This one you would probably want to use the actual pitch knobs. But you can see you can get some really interesting tones out of this. But basically, all this is two sine waves. The first oscillator is 3 octaves up. The fourth oscillator is 4 octaves up. And actually, it is FMing from B. So there is a little bit of FM going on at 46%. I don't think there's, yeah, all of these are off, so there's nothing to worry about with the effects. We just added, again, the same stuff, 2 dispersers. One's lower. I, again, would try to tune these to where it made sense. And then we have the amp on blues at 13% just to saturate it a little bit. Overdrive, the same as the last one. Only thing is we pulled down the dynamics. Gives it more of like a sharp frequency when you have the dynamics all the way up. There's just one frequency in there that I think sounds a little bit harsh. The Pro Q is doing the same thing, but it's a little bit lower on this one at 508 Hertz. And then again, Camel Crusher on British Clean. So mess around with that. You don't necessarily even need to have any specific shapes on this. You know, try messing around with different waveforms, different wavetables, and you'll get some really cool tones and sounds out of it. All right, let's go to this next one. So, oh wow, this is a crazy one that I made, I believe, a while ago. Let's see what it sounds like. Yeah, I was trying to make something that sounded like a chainsaw. And I think I got kind of close. So oscillator A, you can go to analog and go to BS2 subby saw. And this wave position is all the way at 1. Pulled the random down on oscillator A. All of this stuff is pretty stock. The level is only at 14% on oscillator A. And the octave is down 3 octaves on oscillator A. Oscillator B, we've got the octave down just by 1 octave. We've added 6 voices of unison. The detune is at 0.04. Blend is the same. Phase is the same. Random is at 53. And the wavetable position is at 57. So pulse width mono Juno is also in analog right there. So the level on this is at 49%, and the sync is at 1.47%. So that's both of those oscillators. There is a sub oscillator down -3. I don't think this is actually having a huge effect. Actually, yes, it is. So when we have this going directly out and not being affected by any of the post-processing, when it goes through all of the distortion, it's giving it that extra crunch. It's kind of like if you take noise and a sine wave, a low like sub-frequency sine wave, and do a hard clip on the saturator together, that'll give you some really nice crunch. But that's pretty much what was happening here. We just saturated both of them together to give it more of a grit. And then we added just AC hum to the noise oscillator. LFO1 is just affecting the master tune. So the master tune is at just 3. LFO2 is also affecting the master tune. Sometimes I like to give them a little bit of a transient, my sustains, but not always. So LFO2 is affecting the master tune by 24. And then let's take a look at LFO3. So this is going at 2 bars for the rate. It is triggered to loop, and it is just going up and down at a pretty slow rate. You could make it go a lot faster, and that could give it some interesting distortion and crunch. I kind of like it actually going way faster. All right, so then the next part is the reverb filter. So we've just got a reverb filter from the miscellaneous folder that is affecting oscillators A and B. The cutoff is at 308 hertz. Resonance is at 49%. Drive damp are at 0, and the mix is all the way up. So we do have key tracking enabled on this filter in case we want to move up and down. The reverb filter will move with whatever note we decide to play. So yeah, that is pretty much it. The LFO2 is on envelope mode, so it just shoots one time. It just goes through the motion once. And so is LFO1. Now let's take a look at the effects. So again, no hyper, I believe. Yeah, no. Oh, actually, I do have some hyper. Wow. So I added LFO3 to the mix of the hyper and the hyper dimension. The mix on the dimension portion is all the way down, so the size isn't actually doing anything. This is just kind of adding extra voices in. We added a distortion on the rectify preset. The distortion drive is at 50%, and the distortion mount is at 39%. And the LFO3 is also affecting that by 12. The LFO3 is affecting the mix on the hyper by 24. We also have a flanger, but that is not actually doing anything because the mix is all the way down. So the only other thing is this EQ, and it just looks like I was boosting a little bit of the high end. So around 2000 hertz, I added 5 decibels of gain at a 30% curve. So that is pretty much everything in Serum. Now we added overdrive. Pretty sure this is stock. I just wanted to overdrive the entire frequency spectrum with it. And then we added amp on lead. So let's see what it sounds like without it. It gives it a lot more grit. And it's at 100% wet. And the output is dual, so it gives it more stereo signal. We have saturator on a medium curve. Everything is pretty much stock there, just have soft clip on. We have that AU matrix reverb again. If you guys don't have AU matrix reverb, that's fine. You can use realistically any reverb that you want. Just make sure that the size is kind of small and the density is not super small, maybe medium density. So yeah, again, any reverb, just dial in some of those different parameters and it'll go a long way. After the reverb, we put saturator on a soft sine at 5 decibels. And then I EQ'd this because it was a little bit too wide, so I split it into the mono stereo mode with this EQ8. In the side signal, I decided to cut some of the low mids, and on the mono, I guess the mono wasn't strong enough, so I decided to boost some of the high mids. Then, because it was very sharp still, I decided to add Soothe. Soothe is a godsend. It can easily save you a lot of headache. Basically, it just finds really resonant peaks and cuts them back. So it does it live as well, versus if you were to just grab an EQ, you know, you could pull down a resonant frequency, but if there's any pitch movement in the sound, it's not going to follow it. And Soothe does exactly that. It will follow the sound and make the adjustments throughout the whole sound. So you can kind of hear there's a little bit more harshness. So yeah, that's pretty much that. And then I just pulled the width back a little bit more with this utility. All right, we're on the last sound now. So this one I made using Massive. Massive is an older style synth, so it might look a little bit crazy, but you know, it's been around for quite a while, and some of the wave tables in here are pretty iconic. I actually have the wave tables from this, and I use them in Serum sometimes. But let's kind of get into it. So basically we have the square saw 1. I'm pretty sure that's standard as soon as you open up Massive. So nothing crazy is going on with that. The only oscillator that has any amplitude coming out is oscillator 1. So then we're sending it through a scream filter. So Serum actually has a scream filter now as well. So realistically, if you have the waveforms and you import them into Serum, you can get pretty damn close with all of that in Serum. But what we did was we went to the scream filter. The fourth envelope is automating the cutoff, and then the macro controls are automating the scream and then the resonance. So down here, if I move either of these, you'll see both of these move. So I'm moving the first one. You can see right here, macro 1 is moving, and macro 2 is also mapped to that. So there's not a whole lot going on. Envelope 4 is the amplitude envelope, and so the volume is following this envelope, and it's also modulating the cutoff for the first filter. So that's pretty standard stuff in Massive. The post-processing is where this sound really comes together. So we put on the rock amp preset on dual output, so we have some more stereo signal. OTT to really squash it, and then we gave it 12 decibels of gain. Again, we have that AU matrix reverb. The size on this is at 0.0254 seconds. The small density is at 0.417. You guys can kind of see that stuff, and if you have it, you just copy it if you want. The dry wet is at 71.6. So I myself like this reverb. You could just do the same or something similar with a different reverb. I even have another reverb on after it. So you can see here I have the stock Ableton reverb. The pre-delay is down. The K is very short, 579 milliseconds. I'm cutting out the lows. I added some diffusion to it, and 40% on the dry wet. And then I just boosted around the 2000 hertz range because I felt like it sounded better. Then I added my strangle preset, a saturator on soft sine, giving it 3 decibels of gain. Again, I did the same EQ. I'm pretty sure I just copy and pasted it right over. And then I added a disperser. Let's put it on one that would make sense. Awesome. And then pretty much just pulled the width down and put soothe on it as well, because again, there were some really harsh resonant peaks that I didn't like. You can see a lot of that there. And then a glue compressor. So if you look at this, the dry wet is all the way down. So the glue compressor is not actually compressing or doing anything. This is just soft clipping the sound. That's it. That's all that's happening. So yeah, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to show you all today. So yeah, if there's anything else that you guys want to learn about or want me to show you, just let me know down in the comments. I'd be happy to do it. Thanks again for stopping by and taking the time out of your day to watch my videos. It really means a lot to me. If you liked what you saw, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next one.